Sounds like it was a quick and easy surgery for Joe Burrow, plus some good news for some players on the PUP list and observations from day one of training camp.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We cover the Cincinnati Bengals every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network on Locked On Bengals. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you hit the follow button on your audio platform so we're delivered to your devices every day when we upload our new updates on all things Bengals. Joe Burrow had a quick and easy surgery. Sounds like he's headed home from the hospital by the time you listen to this episode of Locked On Bengals. Some good news on the PUP list to get into. Some standouts from day one of training camp, even though Joe Burrow wasn't present. Plenty to talk about today as the Bengals have gotten things underway across the street from Paul Brown Stadium downtown. We'll start with Joe Burrow. He had his appendectomy. Yesterday, we weren't sure whether or not that procedure had been completed. Sounds like it went through without a hitch. And sounds like there's no real timetable for his return per se. You ask Zach Taylor, they probably ease him back in. You ask Jamar Chase, he's probably going to come back tomorrow and act like nothing has gone wrong and nothing has happened. So the guy is tough. We know that, but we also know that the Bengals will ease guys back from injury. But good news for Burrow that the surgery went without complication, without issue, and he's on his way home.
Yeah, it wouldn't be shocking at all to see him in the facility maybe as early as Thursday by the time some people are watching or hearing this. That would not shock me. Now, again, in the facility is much different. It could be treatment. It could be just doing different things, doing different workouts. He is a known for wanting to work out daily. And I'm not saying he's going to go through a super intense workout on Thursday, but wouldn't be shocked at all if he's here at the facility, Jake. But good news overall. I didn't think they would delay it a day or two. It felt weird, right, saying that and thinking that. And so I'm glad they were able to get it done on Tuesday. Why? Because that means they're that much closer to getting him back on the field. Because I got to be honest, covering camp was a bit weird without Joe Burrow. Not a fan of that. Not a fan of it. So I'm glad that this is going to be something that's, relatively minor, and we're going to see him soon. But there were also some other good injury updates, starting with Alex Kappa, who got activated off the PUP list. And I know some were concerned about it. I talked to him in the locker room. He referred me to his athletic trainer when asked if he was all systems go, even though Zach Taylor was going to be take it light with him early on, but he was out there. He did have a helmet on, didn't participate in the team sessions, but that's okay because he was out there. And I think if they were playing Sunday, he'd be able to play. The good news is they're not playing Sunday, so they can take their time with his recovery and make sure he's 110%, not just 100% when he's on the field.
Same is true for Samaje Perine, activated off of the physically unable to perform list. So a couple bits of good news for some Bengals veterans getting healthy and getting back in the mix of practice, even if it isn't a full go yet for Alex Kappa. Some participation, certainly better than none. Lyle Collins was on the rehab field, of course, riding the bike at some point during Wednesday's practice. And the one thing that we didn't mention yesterday, the Mike Garafolo tweet, that I was thinking about when I was confused about who tweeted about what, was that according to Garafolo, if it was a regular season, Collins would be good to go. So it doesn't sound like it's anything of massive concern, at least at this point. And he's out there on the rehab field getting some work in. And Zach Taylor did also say that he will be expected to be ready for the regular season.
Yep. And that's obviously great news. I watched him jog, and he was jogging relatively slow, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't run faster, of course. He was in a hoodie, was alongside Frank Pollock for most of the practice, which, by the way, in a hoodie, it wasn't hot, like Cincinnati August hot, late July hot, training camp hot on Wednesday, but it was still way too hot for a hoodie. So my man Lyle is trying to sweat it out a little bit, I guess, right? And get a little extra sweat in. But overall, he, looked fine. Wasn't anything to be concerned about. And speaking of looking fine, he didn't participate in a lot of the team stuff or any of the team stuff, excuse me. But T. Higgins looked just fine. Looked like normal T. Was reaching down, caught a pass from Drew Plitt, who the Bengals signed, by the way, on Wednesday. Released John Brandon. Minor move, relatively speaking, just to have a third quarterback with Joe Burrow out. But he is a Loveland native, which is a suburb of Cincinnati, for those that don't know. Anyways, reached down, a shoestring grab by T. Higgins. So it's like, oh, that shoulder is just fine. So he's looked like he was all systems go, moving really well. And that's really, really good news for this Bengals offense, obviously, because when you think about T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and you don't want to miss one of those guys. And Higgins looked the part. And I did talk to him, and he said the biggest thing he was working on this offseason was mentally getting sharper and understanding the NFL game. And so it's not like his development necessarily got hurt by this shoulder injury with what he wanted to improve on the most.
Yeah, these receivers for the Bengals, always worth remembering just how young they are, 22 and 23 years older, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So coming into the league, quite young, quite a lot to learn. One other injury note is Logan Wilson was good to go, from my understanding, also in the same boat as T. Higgins and Alex Kappa and these other veterans, where my understanding is that he did not participate in the team part of the workouts, but was otherwise available for practice.
Yep. Yeah. He took place. The funny part is the one team drill he did take part in, and there was no contact, of course. There's no contact in practice right now, was the field goals at the end, which we can talk about during our observations. But he was out there, no contact, so it doesn't matter. And then one, hopefully not as serious as it looked, note.
Yeah.
But yeah, really seemed to be serious injury. And so we'll see for Elijah Holyfield. I was thinking of numbers because early in camp, 90 guys, you think of numbers. I was like 36. Elijah Holyfield suffered a right leg, knee injury, was carted off. Didn't look good. I hope it wasn't nearly as bad as it looked. But thinking of him, hopefully it's not as serious as it looked.
Yeah, always brutal when you have these sorts of injuries in training camp and early training camp in particular. And for a guy who's trying to make his way onto a roster, trying to make his way onto the practice squad, you obviously wish all the best for guys in those positions, really anybody that gets hurt. But I feel like it's especially a little painful when it is one of those guys who's on the fringe of the roster in the first place and trying to win a job. So hopefully he's all right. Hopefully it's not as bad as it looked, but certainly sending him all the best. Plenty of observations about practice itself now that we've got the injury updates out of the way to talk about today, including Stanley Morgan season. I hope so. We'll get into Morgan and other standouts coming up next.
But first, I got to tell you about Built Bars. And this is actually the perfect time. It's the perfect time to talk about Built Bars because part of our observations in this next part of the show are going to be about a guy who looks like he's on the Built Bar diet, about a guy who looks lean, looks ready to go. And yes, he is battling for a position spot. No, it is not Stanley Morgan Jr. The suspense is building. And by the way, you should get on the Built Bar plan too, because it's the #1 protein bar on the planet. And cookie dough chunk puffs are the newest addition to their amazing selection of protein bars. They only have 160 calories, a whopping 15 grams of protein, and they taste amazing. So get to built.com right now. Check out all of their different flavors. Order them because they're covered in 100% chocolate. They taste amazing. And when you do, make sure you use promo code LOCK15 at built.com and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 at built.com.
Can't wait until we're finished this podcast, James. I'm going to go have one of those Built Puffs that are sitting in my pantry, have a nice little afternoon snack. Some standouts from practice on Wednesday. Excited to hear who you're teasing looks like he's on the Built Bar diet. I do want to start with Stanley Morgan Jr. Sounds like he had a couple really nice catches today and had some opportunities to work in with the ones. Of course, Joe Burrow not there. Maybe by the time T. Higgins is working in team, Joe Burrow will be back anyway. But in those team sessions, Stanley Morgan getting those first team reps. And I guess also worth noting while we're going to get into Stanley Morgan, The stand-ins for Alex Kappa and for Lyle Collins were Hakeem Adeniji at right guard and Isaiah Prince at right tackle.
Yep.
So there's been some speculation about Hakeem Adeniji's job security if they only keep 9 offensive linemen. And, Isaiah Prince is going to be a backup tackle. So there's your first indicator early in camp that Adeniji is coming first off the bench at right guard and Isaiah Prince, logically, I guess, coming first off the bench at right tackle. Let's talk about Stanley Morgan. I'm also curious about if you noticed where Deontay Smith was working as he got in with the second team. But let's start with Stanley Morgan.
Yeah, Stanley Morgan Jr. was great. He was great. And I actually introduced myself to him in the open locker room because even though I've covered him for a couple of years now, never met him in person and didn't get to talk to him during OTAs in person just because you're trying to catch up with as many guys. And was really nice, wished him luck. And I'm not saying I'm the thing. Man, this dude, he balled out on Wednesday. 3 contested catches that were clean routes. And it's like, are they going to make that throw? He's going to make that throw. And Morgan just laid out for a couple balls. But 3 contested catches that I could think of where you didn't think that he was going to make the catch, but you saw the athleticism, really good hands. He was able to hold on to the ball in traffic. And again, he's not getting hit, but there's still a defender on him and a defender around him. And guess what? They're not wanting to happen. They don't want Morgan to catch that ball. And so they're chopping at it. They're trying to get it out. And so, I was really impressed with what he was able to do. And that's the thing is if he flashes as a receiver, we know he's a good blocker. We know he's good on special teams. Like that's exactly what they're looking for at that 4th wide receiver spot. So it's early. You don't want to overreact, but I think the MVP of day one, Stanley Morgan Jr.
And I think that he was a favorite for wide receiver 4, unless you thought it was Mike Thomas, just because of how he was used last year. Last year, he probably played the most. I could verify this very easily. I think he played the most of any of the non-big 3 wide receivers, especially late in the year when they were using him a lot in run packages, especially after Auden Tate was hurt. But good to hear him showing off as a receiver as well, because as longtime listeners of the show remember, way back when Morgan was draft eligible, Joe Goodberry and I were very, very keen on him as a draftable prospect, and landing him as a undrafted free agent was a nice little win for the Bengals. Let's talk Deontay Smith really quick. I'm not saying he was a standout, but I am curious if Hakeem Adeniji was working at right guard. Where did you notice Deontay Smith working today?
Tackle.
Left tackle?
At tackle, yeah, left tackle. So we'll see if he stays there, if that's the plan. To me, it's going to be interesting. We've talked about all these offensive line spots. The one true position battle is at left guard, right? And that was Jackson Carman. So we'll see. It's still early. Like it from an offensive line standpoint, it's just like OTAs for the next couple days. And then that'll change when they get pads on and they can start hitting. But Deontay Smith, from what I saw, he was at left tackle. No, I can't lie. It's not like I had all eyes on 70. Yeah. But from what I saw, he was at left tackle.
Yeah, a lot to pay attention to, as you mentioned, with 90 guys or 90 or so guys around. Trey Hendrickson back. Speaking of 90 somethings,
him and Sam Hubbard were like attached to the hip today. Like, not that they aren't normally, but they walk past me from the one field to the other, and the media's in between. And I look, and they're talking to each other. And then like 10, 15 minutes go by, and I look, and 91 and 94 are right next to each other talking. Hendrickson was on a knee, and Hubbard was talking to him. So, man, they really are attached to the hip. I bet Hubbard was lost during OTAs without Trey Hendrickson. I'm not going to lie. I think that he might have been a little bit lost.
So what I'm hearing is we need a Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard buddy cop movie.
There we go. I don't know, man. I don't know about a movie. Although,
have you seen Sam Hubbard's commercials?
I'm not going to go there. Did you see? Did you see speaking of Sam Hubbard, the GQ photo shoot that the Bengals social media released? The Sam Hubbard one is really insane. Good. How did he pull that off? It was so good.
Hey, these guys are all athletes. All these guys, man.
Freak. He's a freak. Being able to do that. He's a giant man.
He did test really well. In case you forgot, I like to remind people that Sam Hubbard did test incredibly well at the combine.
Sam Hubbard might be a better ballerina than actor, maybe. I don't know.
Ooh. Hot take.
No, ballerina's not bad. No.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying,
could you be a ballerina? I couldn't. I'd be a better actor than a ballerina. Just because he was on two toes. Like, how do you do that?
No, I know it's hard. Who else stood out to you, James? Let's get back to the football on Wednesday. Who else stood out to you at practice on Wednesday?
Well, all right. Let's get to it. Let's get to the position battle of all battles. We talked about it on Tuesday night, Wednesday's show.
I have a guess. Is it Cal Adamitis?
No.
Oh.
Wah, wah, wah.
All right.
Okay. So my man on the Built Bar plan, and I don't know this for sure, ladies and gentlemen, but I do know that it looked like it was 2009 out there. I did a double take, and then I turned back and looked at Kevin Huber's former teammate, Tony Pike, at the University of Cincinnati, and I said, Tony, why don't you look like this guy? Because this guy looks like he's still in college. Kevin Huber is lean. He's mean. I did a triple take when he was holding today. I was like, is that short Drew Crispin? Because you know how Kevin Huber, he's never been heavy. I'm not trying to say that, but it's not like he looked chiseled or anything. And he doesn't look necessarily chiseled, but he's definitely thinner. I mean, he got rid of some bad weight. Looks really good. Can't wait to talk to him about this because I wonder what he did. I wonder what changed in his diet. But for the first time, he's battling for a job, and he looks the part. Like, it's like, oh, Kevin Huber just morphed back. Maybe he called Tom Brady and got on the TB12 diet. Because if you're on the TB12 diet, you could probably punt for 70 years. But he looks really good.
There you go. Kevin Huber. I'm still thinking about Sam Hubbard for some reason. Kevin Huber on the Built Bar plan. Anybody else stand out to you on day one, James, for on-field performance? I mean, we could say on special teams, Evan McPherson did miss a field goal, as far as I understand, and the rookies, the rookies and or young guys, Drew Crispin and Cal Adamitis, were not working with the first team on special teams, from what I understand as well.
Yeah, but so they weren't. You're right, but they did snap. In McPherson held or McPherson kicked and Crispin held for him, and Crispin did a really good job holding. So McPherson was 6 for 6, 3 from Clark Harris and Kevin Huber, and then 3 from Cal Adamitis and Drew Crispin. And Cal Adamitis had a few snaps that were like not awful, but it pushed Crispin to clean them or field them cleanly, and he did a great job at it. So there's nothing today that I saw, as I just praised Kevin Huber's physique, that scared me about Drew Crispin's holding. So I think that job is going to be a fun one to watch because Kevin Huber clearly serious. All right. If you went on a diet this offseason, you're clearly serious and change things up there, working out more, whatever the case is. And 2, Drew Crispin, what's his path to the roster? You better be able to earn that trust as a holder. And he did a good job despite a couple shaky snaps from Cal Adamitis on Wednesday.
That is good to hear for Drew Crispin. When we talked about the special teams battle, when we have talked about the special teams battles, I've felt like he had more of a chance in the first place of the specialists fighting for roster spots. So that is interesting that it's starting out looking that way. But of course, we're only talking about three holds at this point. It is early days yet. There will be many changes, and we'll see how these guys are punting as well. Plenty more to talk about, I would say, after day one of camp. Some interesting quotes from various players that we can get into, some other players that stood out at practice. So let's finish up our day one recap of the Bengals training camp coming up next. James, we haven't talked about the wide receivers very much for what they did on the field, and perhaps that's because Joe Burrow is not present at quarterback. I haven't heard you mention Chris Evans, which is a little shocking. I thought that might be one of the early names out of your mouth. But you got anything else on the offensive side of the ball that you liked on Wednesday?
Well, I got some notes. A Jamar Chase note. He did a lot of track work this offseason. Is at 200 pounds, not 205. Says he wants to get back to 205. Says he's lifting more in the gym than he did before. Maybe he's on the Built Bar plan too. Didn't ask him. I'm going to ask him tomorrow now. But the thing that stood out to me, he was like, I don't want to come off the field. He was like, I'm not getting tired anymore. And that's why he went through those track workouts. And so
Yeah.
I love that. How many guys go for 1,455 yards, set the franchise record for receiving yards as a rookie, the rookie record, and just crushed Jalen Ramsey in key moments in the Super Bowl. And he's like, yeah, I can't come off the field anymore. So I think that mindset, along with just some OTA stuff, wouldn't be shocked at all if we see more handoffs to Jamar and a little more creative ways to get him the ball. Wouldn't shock me. Just throw that out there now here, early camp observations.
And putting him in the slot a little bit more. I'll be curious to know about those alignments, putting him in motion a little bit more. I think the Bengals started doing some of this more as the season went on. So that's something, certainly, if you're attending camp, to keep your eyes on. Just keep your eyes on number one pre-snap and see where he goes, see where he's aligned. I also read that Jamar Chase is interested in some direct statistical competition with his former teammate at LSU, Justin Jefferson. They have apparently a touchdown bet already in place that they made when they were working out together in California. And Jamar Chase also expressed that he hopes he gets to 2,000 yards in a season before Justin Jefferson. So some lofty goals for one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver, depending on who you ask, for Jamar Chase in year 2.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame him for saying that, though. Like, I like, other people that cover the Bengals and other podcasts, right? But guess what? I hope Locked On Bengals stays number one, right? So that's basically all Jamar said. But yeah, 2,000, could he get there? I'll say this. I think it's sort of harder for Jamar to get there in this offense because I think T. Higgins is better than any other receiver that the Vikings have. And they're going to be a little more run heavy, I'd say. So it might be, it could be harder because Justin Jefferson could get a bunch of targets. Adam Thielen's been dinged up, and I'm not going to overanalyze this too much. It's really hard to get 2,000 yards regardless. But man, I mean, I didn't even mention Tyler Boyd just now. Tyler Boyd would, is in that Adam Thielen realm for sure as far as receivers go, even though Thielen's put up bigger numbers in recent years.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on, talk about some rookies, shall we? Cam Taylor-Britt sounds like he had a nice pass breakup in his first training camp practice. Dax Hill out there with the ones. What did you see from those guys? I guess it's a little early for Zach Carter in the trenches. Not a whole lot to talk about in the trenches while the pads aren't on, but you talk about the defensive backs, and we can probably talk a little bit about Volson as well, and how he looked in his first day of training camp practice.
Yeah, I mean, with Volson, it's just really hard to tell.
Yeah, same trench idea, but out there with the second team. And
yeah, which is good. It's a good sign that he's out there with the second team. You're right. As far as the other guys go, let's start with Dax Hill. I think Dax Hill looked like he took a step from an in-shape standpoint. I know he had been training, obviously, for the Combine and was kind of in Combine shape for OTAs. To me, legs looked bigger. You could see the veins popping and things like that. So I think he was working between OTAs and training camp. But a thing that stood out to me, and Dax Hill played well, and you're right. He was with the ones and had a good play against Hayden Hurst and was guarding. So there you go. There's an example. He was guarding tight ends and things like that. But Lou Anarumo called him over after a play, and I got video of this. He talked to him for probably 15 seconds and was explaining stuff. And I don't know, it was just such a cool moment for me. I was just like, oh, that's really cool that you get to see that, because rarely do you see the defensive coordinator talk with a specific player like that separately. But no, Dax Hill looked good. Cam Taylor-Britt, athletic. I mean, the athleticism really, really pops off. And they didn't do like one-on-ones with the receivers or anything like that. That's not going to happen. I would expect it to be a couple days before we see that. But I can't wait to see Cam Taylor-Britt just go at it with these receivers. And one thing he did say, I forget, I mean, he told it to one of these television reporters during the open locker room. He was like, oh, Joe isn't here? Damn, I wanted to pick him off and hand him the ball. So he's pretty competitive. I like Cam Taylor-Britt.
Love the confidence. Always have. Like, that was one of the things when they drafted him that we talked about, the way he carries himself, the way he plays, the energy he brings, and the way he plays the game of football. I think from a non-technical perspective, from a wishy-washy, this is the way you carry yourself perspective is very fun. And the athleticism popping off also fun. Anything else from training camp, James? Because I have one other note that we can hit before we get out of here. If not,
just last thing, Tyler Shelvin did have a wrap on his left wrist, though. Did participate in practice, so good to go there. Cleared. It's not like there's an issue, but he's still nursing that a little bit, or at least protecting it.
So some things that we're going to watch in the next couple of days, James, I think, is alignment for Dax Hill, how he's being deployed, if they're using him all over the place, or if they're really working him at Jesse Bates' position, which is what the gist I kind of got today is somewhere in between those two things. They were working him kind of in that sort of Jesse Bates role pre-snap as trying to get people set on defense, working on communication. But if he's running with Hayden Hurst, some differences. I also saw that he came from, it looked like a split safety, 2 high shell on a pass intended for Jamar Chase on the sideline. That wasn't completed. So looks like he's being used in multiple ways. So continuing to monitor his alignment, continuing to monitor health, of course, something we will be watching as guys start to get healthier, hopefully as training camp goes on and get more active in these practices. And then Jamar Chase, we talked about alignment for Jamar Chase. Is he going to be used in a more versatile fashion? Because getting him into the slot should be a nice little productivity boost for him as well. Chris Evans, is he getting involved as a wide receiver? I'm curious there. And of course, when they start getting heavier into camp and get further along, the punt return battle and some of those specialist battles that we talked about on yesterday's show will be interesting to watch as well. Where I wanted to wrap up, James, just really quickly, the seniors for the Pro Football Hall of Fame finalists were announced, and both Ken Anderson and Ken Riley made this version of the cut down as Bengals fans wait for them to have their chance. There's a chance that both of them get in this year. So we'll see how that goes. That's technically possible. I'm not saying it's likely necessarily, but a good sign for both guys to have made the finalist list.
For sure. No doubt about it. Ken squared. Hopefully they both get in. And I do want to make a statement, though, about that. Why the hell are you announcing the Hall of Fame finalists the day all these training camps open? Can you do it a week ago? So they get a little love, a little shine, a little something. It was like the worst time ever. It's like baseball with the draft. They have games going on with their draft. Yeah. Well, that's dumb. So it gets lost in the shuffle. I didn't even get to write about it because I was at camp, and maybe I will at some point, but and maybe that's on me, but I think it just gets lost in the shuffle because camps are opening, and it's not like NFL Network's going to talk much about the Hall of Fame finalists. It's probably a 1-minute segment.
Especially, these are the seniors and the media and front office types. This isn't the main,
exactly,
balloting or what have you. So that's about it from day one of camp. We need Joe Burrow to get back here, James. I want to talk about some Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase stuff. I want to talk about Joe Mixon running the ball behind this offensive line once the pads come on, and some edge matchups I'm excited for, some DJ Reader versus Alex Kappa and Ted Karras matchups I'm excited for, some use for some of these linemen, where these guys are lining up. Do we see Deontay Smith get opportunities in multiple spots, or is he going to be primarily working as backup left tackle? Plenty of things to be curious about as camp goes on. Does Hakeem Adeniji get challenged at right guard, or is he going to be that backup right guard? As of now, sounds like that's his job to lose. So that's going to do it for this episode.
It's early. Now. They could alternate. Let's not go crazy.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out if Kappa continues to be held out tomorrow, if somebody else is working at right guard in those team drills as they ease Alex Kappa back into the mix. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Training camp continues with another practice on Thursday. We'll have your updates after that practice on YouTube, everywhere you get your podcasts. Those episodes will be up in the evening for either your nighttime listening pleasure or your drive to work on Friday. Plus, Back Together Saturday will be a special edition of the Locked On Bengals podcast. So instead of Sunday night, when you might normally expect our episodes, since the Bengals are off on Sunday, we will have an episode for you on Saturday after Back Together Saturday that will carry you over until the Bengals are back at practice on Tuesday. That's going to do it. Like I said, hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Until next time, hoo day and have a good one.